compare and contrast plots.
All right, everyone, listen up. I'm going to tell you all about the time I rescued Zaid.
Not this again, Ari.
I remember it like it was yesterday. Zaid was in big trouble. I faced the biggest battle I ever had to face and conquered. I used my wand to transform Doc the villain. At last, Zaid was free.
Ari, that's not what happened. I rescued you, remember? I remember like it was yesterday. Ari was in big trouble. Saving him was difficult, but I'm always up for a challenge. Doc didn't stand a chance. I used my powers to transform the villain. At last, Ari was free.
Ari and Zaid both told a story about rescuing each other. Each story had its own plot, or the events that make up a story. The plot of a story is made up of these 5 elements: an exposition, or the beginning of the story where the characters, setting, and problem are introduced; the rising action, or the events that help build toward the climax of the story; the climax, or the turning point of a story where the conflict of the plot reaches its peak; the falling action, the events after the climax that lead to a resolution, which is the conclusion of a story. We're going to compare and contrast each plot from their stories using this comparison chart. First, let's look at each exposition and think, how are they alike? Both stories have the same setting. Now think, how are they different? In Ari's story, Zaid is captured. But in Zaid's story, Ari is captured. Next, let's look at each rising action and think, how are they alike? Both characters use their special skills on the villain, Doc. Now think, how are they different? Ari uses their wand, and Zaid uses his powers. We don't have any differences, so let's look at each climax and think, how are they alike? Both characters have to overcome a villain. We don't have any differences, so let's look at each falling action and think, how are they alike? Both characters transform the villain, so we can add "and transform" to our earlier observation. We don't have any differences, so let's look at each resolution and think, how are they alike? In both plots, the characters get rescued. Now think, how are they different? In Ari's story, they are the hero. But in Zaid's story, he is the hero. Before we see what's happening at the campfire, let's summarize. Remember, the plot is all the events that make up a story, and it is made up of 5 elements: the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and the resolution. We can compare and contrast the 5 elements of a plot using a comparison chart. In order to do that, we look at each element and think, how are they alike? And record it under both. Then we look at each element again and think, How are they different? And record the differences under each plot.
Sock Dog, is that you?
Uh-oh. It looks like there's another version of the story to tell.